and I'm a CFI for Purdue Aviation LLC here in West Lafayette, Indiana. Today, I'm going to talk about a very entry-level topic to flying. This is going to be helpful for those getting their private pilot's license or review for anyone along their early flight training. So, we're becoming pilots, right? We are going to take our plane and take it off into the sky. We're going to go and take our plane into the up direction. Throughout the beginning of our flight training, we'll talk about the 4 forces of flight. And the first one is lift. Our airplane goes in the up direction using lift. Well, let's talk about lift. How can something this big fly into the sky? How can we get something like this? Well, through the force of lift. Let's go ahead and talk about it, right? I said we have 4 forces of flight. We've got lift, weight, thrust, drag, and lift is in the up direction. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at our airplane from the side. If we look at our side of our airplane, and we look at that wing, and we take a cross section, we call that the airfoil. And if we look at our airfoil and we start defining some points, we've got the leading edge, we've got the trailing edge, and if you were to draw an imaginary line between the two, we call that the chord line. Now, our airplane is going against the wind, and that wind going opposite the direction of the aircraft's flight path is what we call the relative wind, right? The airplane is moving this way against the relative wind. Now we're in our plane, we go, we're flying along, and we rotate and we take off, right? Well, that wind isn't going to change the angle, but the airplane's going to change, right? We're going to rotate up, and then that chord line is going to be angled up. Now, if we were going to extend that relative wind just for demonstration purposes and draw that angle I just talked about that you see there in red, is what we call the angle of attack. And the angle of attack is one of the most critical vocabulary words that I want you to learn and become familiar with in your beginning of your flight training. So, how we increase lift? Well, we increase angle of attack. Well, Sam, that doesn't really explain what lift is. That explains how we increase lift, right? We increase our angle of attack, we increase lift. But let's talk about lift to a deeper level. And we start with a man named Bernoulli. And Bernoulli had a principle called Bernoulli's principle. Now, as pilots, we're not becoming physics masters, mathematician masters. No, what we're trying to learn is the principle and the very bare bone roots of what this guy developed, what Bernoulli's principle developed. So, if we look at an hourglass, something we're all very familiar with here, Bernoulli took a look at that hourglass and he rotated it, right? And he took all these different calculations and he put in his little meters and widgets and dials and made all these measurements, but no. Like I said, we just want to understand the roots. So let's go back to the hourglass shape that we all know and let's rotate it to the side. And once we do that, we're going to look at something here, right? So he rotated that hourglass and he noticed through his gauges that at the beginning of the hourglass, when the speed of a fluid, like sand in an hourglass, it wasn't moving that fast. And with his dials, he noted that the pressure was a high pressure. And as it came through the neck of that hourglass, the velocity of that fluid sped up. And he noticed that the pressure decreased. So, with those conclusions, we note that as a fluid speeds up, the pressure decreases. And as it slows down, the pressure increases. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, let's go back to the airfoil, right? We're going against the relative wind, right? I want you to look at the front of that airfoil right there. That's got the circle around it. That part of the airfoil is supposed to imitate the neck of an hourglass. So, using Bernoulli's principle, we know that as the velocity moves faster, the pressure decreases, right? So that neck of the hourglass simulates the front of the airfoil right there. The airfoil is designed by the manufacturer to make the speed of the wind move faster over the top of the wing. So therefore, because of that fast-moving air moving over the top of the wing, you get a lower pressure, which means below the wing, we get a high pressure. right? Because the air is moving slower. And we get this because Bernoulli's principle states that as the velocity slows down, pressure decreases. And now that high pressure below the wing is what causes an airplane to be pushed up, right? The high pressure is pushing the airplane up. The high pressure is pushing the airplane up. And you've even got some low pressure on top, sucking the airplane up, right? The high pressure pushes the plane up. And that's where that high pressure comes from. The velocity of the air is moving slower under that wing. Let's go even further now into Isaac Newton and Newton's third law of motion. Newton's third law of motion states that every action has its equal and opposite reaction. Let's look at this boat, for instance, right? This boat driver is moving along, and what's powering the boat? Well, the motor in the back. And the motor in the back is pushing the water backwards. It's displacing the water backwards, and therefore the boat moves forward. Because every action has its equal and opposite reaction. So, when applying this to the same airfoil, the same shape we've been looking at, we know that as the air moves over the wing and over to the back, that downwash, that downflow of the air is moving generally in the down direction. And the opposite of down is nothing but up. So, to conclude, with Newton's third law of motion stating that every action has its equal and opposite reaction, combined with Bernoulli's principle stating that as that air slows down, we get that higher pressure below the wing, and as it speeds up that lower pressure, we take those two theories and we combine it with how we increase our lift with our angle of attack. We now understand why airplanes can go in the up direction and why something this big can fly and take flight into the skies. Thank you so much for joining me on this first little episode. We'll get into a lot more of the ground stuff throughout private training, and I look forward to releasing more content. Don't forget, always ask questions below. Feel free to reach out to me. Purdue Aviation LLC is a Part 61 and they offer Part 141 flight school here in West Lafayette if you too are interested in getting your private pilot license. Thank you for watching.